laner Cool. And now to determine our matchups, #1 seeds will first be drawn into the four elimination matches to learn when they play. After that, second seeds will be randomly drawn into those 4 elimination matches. The only condition you need to be aware of is that 2 teams from the same group cannot face one another in a best-of-5, with the play-in elimination schedule being announced on broadcast immediately after this draw.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, that's why we were all speculating as well that, you know, the teams that they want to play against, they can't be from the same group, so not everybody can get and want to have 1907 Fenerbahce.
Yeah, that too. I feel like Cloud9's probably like, man, we had the easiest group. Feels great to move out of it, most likely, but now we also want to draw the team that we're in the same group as. I think One Esports is probably the one that most people are looking to hopefully end up playing against.
Yeah. I'll be honest, this is my first live draw narrating over the top, so I'm a little nervous to see what's going to unfold for Fnatic. I gotta be, at the end of the day, you know, I'm here, I'm a Worlds representative, but when I go home, I go back to being an EU representative, and I want to be proud of that, and so I'm a little concerned that they may die a really difficult matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they left you with much confidence in that last game. They even struggled the other time as well, having really long series. It does feel like they'll be able to figure it out a little bit more in a best-of-5.
And now they are going to be pulling the Pool 1 seeds first. You see Cool there on your screen. As handsome as ever. Chinese fans happy to see him. Team WE getting the first seed in it. Of course, where they match up is going to affect furthermore when they draw the pools, all of the Pool 2 seeds after this, to see how they're going to stack up against each other. You can see the bracket there on your screen now as we start to fill it out.
Yeah, of course, very funny that Cool from LGD will be able to draw Team WE first. He's been around a few teams, Cool.
Very historic mid laner, always making late runs, and he gets C9 next.
And the interesting thing about this is that, like, until we see the other teams, it's like, what's he gonna draw? But like ultimately in the context of this, it's hard to say exactly how this is going to affect the matchup. Although technically, when you're drawn third, we now know that you're gonna get whatever the third team is, so it will be curious to see.
Yeah, and I think one thing to remember is that this is not a full bracket stage, it's just a single best-of-5 elimination match. So even though WE and C9 look like they're on the same side of the bracket, that does not mean they'll be playing each other.
No, not at all. It's just the one best-of-5. It's all it takes to get you to Worlds. And I guess there's the other thing that lingers, Mark, of the fact that maybe you want Fenerbahce to win these best-of-5s just quietly if you're an NA fan.
I will admit that there is a small bit of bias because there was the point that was made that if all the #1 seeds won from the play-in stage, TSM would have to get World Elite. Now, with Fenerbahce temporarily upsetting that, there's a chance, a fairly high chance, that there will be more variation in the actual group portion of Worlds.
Which does make it more exciting, maybe a little more frustrating if you're in those other 3 teams that have already been seeded in your groups. A lot more uncertainty now as to who is going to show up there, as to who is going to be there. But now with all of the Pool 1 seeds drawn, we're going to be moving on to the Pool 2 seeds, and this is where we will start to get the matchups. Reminder that we will not have the schedule until after everything has been drawn, but still curious to see what the matchups are going to be.
Ah, yeah. Magic hand of Cool. What does he draw?
All right, so just as a reminder, Lion and W were in the same group. So Lion will be moved on to play C9. They will not be able to play Team WE as they both came from Group A.
Thank God. For a second there, I was a little bit concerned that it all came crashing down.
Do we want to look back at that first game that Team WE played?
No, we're good. We're good. It's Cloud9. We're good.
Interesting matchup, I think, because both teams seem to be very early game focused overall.
Next up, team set to play Team WE will be Young Generation. All right.
I mean, this is what you were talking about, potentially a little bit of a macro game looking lineup between these two teams.
Perhaps, of course, the young side and Young Generation have shown that nerves can get to them. So if you are Team WE, this could be the matchup that you dream of.
I'm excited to see Null versus Xie. After Xie was struggling a little bit, I want to see what Null can do. He's been looking steadily better across this stage. Although the bot lane may start to look like a little bit of a weak point up against WE's.
Might be a slight difference there between them.
Also, Nocti was stepping up a lot as well, so I want to see how he actually performs in the best-of-5.
All right, now HKA will be playing Fnatic. They're unable to be matched up against Fenerbahce, and that's probably in their best interest from what we've learned over today's broadcast.
They were struggling a little bit in that matchup versus 1907 Fenerbahce. Fnatic, it's a little concerning because it does feel like this is an early game focused team. They might be able to throw some pressure at Caps in the mid lane, so that could be a bit of an issue.
All right, with now Team 1 locking in against Fenerbahce, that might just be an uphill battle for Team 1. For nothing that they haven't worked with before. Definitely the underdogs coming into the tournament will remain the case. But honestly, out of all the teams you could draw, this is technically, I think for many, the best option.
I mean, I could speak for 1907 Fenerbahce freely when I say this is the best matchup for them to get, to be perfectly honest with you. I would say that Team 1 looked like the shakiest in terms of performance of the teams.
And of course, thank you to Cool and Ren Dong, everyone on the Wuhan side of the broadcast for making that possible. But now, looking at this, we talked about the ideals. We talked about some of the disaster scenarios. I'm still very concerned for Fnatic, but Mark, as our NA representative, how do you feel for Cloud9 right now?
I feel decent overall. I think the big thing is just how much they can abuse Seiya in the mid lane, because that is, you know, the kind of go-to Cloud9 strategy, and Seiya is no slouch at all in the mid lane. The mid laners that were in the rest of Group B did feel like they were prone to that exploitation, and Lion have somewhere that they can play to try and draw some of that C9 pressure down that bot lane if they choose to play more around White Lotus.
And Rusty, curious how you're feeling about Team WE. We talked a little bit about Young Generation as a potential matchup for this team. If you wanted to make a prediction right now, maybe you'll get the chance on the desk as well, but who do you think is going to come out on top of that?
I mean, my initial thoughts between Team WE and Young Generation is quite simply that Team WE should be able to handle them very easily. Of course, the early game is going to be a big factor, a very strong early team themselves. Team WE have been shaky in certain areas, but then you look at Condi and it's like, man, I don't think anyone can keep up with Condi in the jungle.
Let me ask you, Daniel Dracos, EU fan, how do you feel about your HKA?
I'm nervous. I'm incredibly nervous, Marksy, Rusty. I'm worried for Fnatic, but I want to see what they can shift, what they can bring to the table. I also think HKA have a little bit to work on as well. And really the big question for me is how each of these teams are going to adjust. It is only one day, as you mentioned earlier, Mark, and that feels to me like a massive factor coming into this is how much can a single team improve and adjust in a single day.
All right, I think like for a team like HKA, where you're concerned about their barren decision-making and playmaking, that's not something that easily gets fixed in a day most of the time. So this is something where if you're at Fnatic and you're prepping for this game, you say, well, their late game looks really, really shaky. We can probably rely on that. Let's just make sure that we're relatively competitive in the early and mid game, and when we get to this late game, let's just outplay them.
And frankly, when I look at Fnatic, I wouldn't say there was this major fundamental issue with the team themselves for all the games they played. There were shaky victories and there was the one defeat. But even in that defeat, it's like, well, there's one thing there. You could fix that one thing. You know, we had an average jungle top lane game. We had an average mid lane game. But everyone else picked up that slack, put it all together in a best of 5, and you'd be pretty happy overall.
All right, the last one we want to look at is Fenerbahce and Team 1. It does feel pretty Fenerbahce slated, but Team 1 have had a few days to improve. How much of an improvement from Team 1 are we expecting coming into this best of 5?
It's a little difficult to tell just because they swapped their mid laner, Brewster, out for Marth, who seemed to be playing a little bit better, but it was still a very close series. In their first match versus Direwolves, they barely came back from that one. The second one was a bit of a slugfest, so it's really hard to get a read on them, but they did not look like they had one avenue that they were really dominant in, whereas most of these teams you can at least say, well, they do this one thing really well, and if they execute that and clean up a weakness, they're fine.
All right, well, we're going to have to see as we close out the groups portion of the play-in stage. Let's check out who rose up as the best of the Rift, presented by T-Mobile, America's best unlimited network. Now, these are the players that not only stepped up on the world stage, but ensured their team's success moving into the rest of Worlds. A lot of powerhouse names on that list.
Absolutely. Every single one of these guys had been a large part of why their team was able to move out of the group portion of the play-in stage.
Yeah, and of course, Reckless is the first one that does come up here for the bottom lane of Fnatic, and it's weird that we've got him on the list, given what we last saw.
It's very true. Ultimately, 3 of their games, I feel like Reckless and Jesus together were such a big portion of the team, but you are right to call him out in the sense that in that last game, he was also the Achilles heel.
Right, but he was a big portion for why they actually got out of the group. And so he did struggle, and you see that the team loses when Fnatic plays bad. That just even more indicates how important he is for this team. He needs to play well if they hope to get out of the best of 5 elimination portion.
Yeah, 100%. But of course, the other person that we have to look at that you're seeing on your screen is Seiya. Now, this man, I've been very high on Seiya since the beginning of the tournament from game number 1 because he went up against Xie and actually looked better than Xie did. And that's a big feat in and of itself. But he kept that form. They managed to do incredibly well around him and White Lotus, respectively, from Lion. So I'm a big fan of this guy, and I've seen some very big things so far.
And honestly, if we look at the upcoming matchup, I'm incredibly excited to see what he can do in the mid lane because, I mean, this is huge not only for Latin America North, but also just this team has looked incredibly good, has already surprised us when they were able to absolutely outclass Gambit in the group stage. Lion Gaming just looks strong.
I really like how he has a couple different styles that he can play in the mid lane as well. It gives you some good flexibility when playing up against Jensen, because we know Jensen can play a couple different types of champions overall.
I mean, bring up Jensen. He is next on the list, and the matchup that he say is going to have to face down. This one, I think, is going to be a little bit tough. You can see from the highlight reel on your screen that Jensen, kind of a monster in the group stage.
Really did a good job abusing every matchup that he had, not necessarily just in terms of the amount of kills he was able to pick up, but the CS leads, the pressure, the entire team playing through him. And even in that one game where his bot lane was getting rolled, he was the rock to keep the team in the game.
Yeah, really good awareness, really good mechanically, and you can see that Cloud9 put so much emphasis on letting him carry, even though Contract stepped up and had a very good tournament.
Absolutely, the two work in tandem together. It's not one without the other. Jensen, though, is the guy who ends up racking up most of those kills.
I know, it's hard not to pull it back to that jungle mid matchup for Lion versus Cloud9, but we also have to look elsewhere outside of the mid lane in the jungle. Last, and certainly not least, it is the son of Baron himself, Condi. Condi. It was a rough game one, but man, from there, he has looked like a powerhouse.
And he's been the rock of Team WE. Every single time the early game looks shaky, he's being invaded, things are going wrong. Well, it doesn't matter because the jungler of Team WE is able to come through with the one gank that shouldn't happen in the first place, the steals that shouldn't happen. He's called Son of Baron for a reason, and he has been the biggest driving force of their success. To take this game out of the equation in the whole tournament.
And I mean, even then, you know, you give him the carry pass one time, he's able to run wild.
He had that infinity
If
edge.
someone picks Yasuo or Nunu bot against him, he will be ready, guys. Don't
With the
sell him
Graves.
short.
Huge play overall, though, because he is, like you said, the linchpin for a lot of their early game action, and we know that WE is a little bit slower paced of a team, and if you don't have any pressure in the early game, you usually get walked over, so the fact that he's able to get out there and make a lot of plays helps transition them into the mid portion of the game.
Excited to see how they transition to best of fives as well. But from game one to the grand finals, you can follow the best of the Rift in more places than ever. T-Mobile, America's best unlimited network. All right, now, gentlemen, with the matchups drawn, let's take a look at our play-in elimination matches. Of course, we're going to be returning Wednesday. First up, it's going to be the best of 9 between Cloud9 and Lion Gaming. I said best of 9. It's a best of 5. Don't
That'd be a
worry.
long day.
Special circumstances for NA. They're going to have to play an extra 4 games. Just kidding. Best of 5, of course, followed by Fnatic versus Hong Kong Attitude. Then on Thursday, another 2 best of 5, starting with 1907 Fenerbahce taking on Team 1, with Team WE versus Young Generation to close out the play-in stage. And after all of that, we'll have our Pool 3 seeds going into groups.
I respect that we're getting straight into it, getting NA out of the way early, though. Perhaps it's too much of a lingering concern. We need to just get it over and done with in case they lose. And up against Lion Gaming, I mean, I'm just going to say it, there is a chance.
I mean, it is one of those things where Lion Gaming did look pretty strong in the early game versus WE. It does feel like, you know, Cloud9 was the most dominant team in all of play-in stage, at least just based off game time.
Yeah.
So it is a tough matchup for Lion Gaming, I think.
It sounds
I
like
want to see them get to 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's an accomplishment in and of itself, apparently.
All right, we're already starting to count them out, already starting to make excuses, but we're going to see how those teams match up, see exactly what they can do on Wednesday, Thursday, double best of 5 days. Personally, I'm really excited. Mark Z, you'll be joining me.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's been a great run so far, and we also get both Western teams kind of out of the way right away with...
So we can go into Thursday nerves-free.
Yeah, so
just,
or you can already be defeated, you know, as a Fnatic fan.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Unfortunately. I do think, though, most likely Fnatic still have the advantage in that matchup, just with how shaky HK looked around Baron and the fact that that's not easily cleaned up. I trust that the veteran leadership on Fnatic will be able to guide them in those kind of situations.
You'd have to hope so. I will give the edge to the Western teams coming into this, but there's always that fleeting feeling of, is it actually that case at all?
I live for that fleeting feeling, Rusty. All right, well, thank you both for joining. Now for myself, the casters, and the entire live broadcast crew, thanks for watching. We're going to see you guys Wednesday for more of Worlds 2017. Have a wonderful morning or night.
Morning.
Morning.
Definitely morning. It's light outside.